Let us turn now to the joint meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. Mr. City Clerk, could you call the roll?
Council members Najarian.
Here.
Quintero. Here. Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Draymond.
Here.
And roll for the agency, please.
Agency members Draymond.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Chairman Najarian.
Here.
Thank you. And, excuse me, could we hear the item I've written over it. It's the public hearing item. Let me open the public hearing, and then let's go to hear the items listed there.
Well, just so the public knows that this was properly posted, I'll read my report. The agenda for the August...
let me just ask you, just as a procedural thing, Mr. City Clerk, so I know for future, the previous joint meeting, I asked for the report, but we went to to read the item.
Then that was my error.
I assumed it was mine, so
well,
that's why I'm asking just for clarification. I'm learning a few things here, so that no intention to fix blame for it. I just want to know.
Easily skipped over it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the last meeting was also posted appropriately outside City Hall, but this one also was. This is August 19, 2008, public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the notice was posted last Thursday. And that would be August 14, 2008, on the bulletin board. And you're right, it is a public hearing. It's Director of Development Services regarding Embassy Suites Hotel project located at 800 North Central Avenue. At 1A's agency resolution approving a fourth implementation agreement by and between the Redevelopment Agency and Newage Glendale LLC, making certain findings and authorizing the execution of said agreement. 1B is council resolution approving a fourth implementation agreement by and between the Redevelopment Agency and Newage Glendale LLC, making certain findings and authorizing the execution of said agreement. At C is agreement resolution, agency resolution approving a first amendment to the cooperation agreement by and between the City of Glendale and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, making certain findings and authorizing the execution of said agreement. D is council motion approving a first amendment to the cooperation agreement by and between the City of Glendale and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, making certain findings and authorizing the execution of said agreement. And E is the agency motion approving a sign variance subject to the comments and conditions from the agency.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. And let me, before we go anywhere, let me do a little housekeeping and turn to Attorney Van Meiden. Just some housekeeping items. A, C, and E are agency items.
That's correct.
And B and D are council items.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Phil Lansfane. Let's go to Phil Lansfane for this.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency, there are a lot of motions and resolutions for you today to accomplish one thing, essentially. That is to delete the obligation by the City Redevelopment Agency and the developer to vacate Burchette. When we originally conceived this project, the idea was to vacate the street to the individual property owners. There's some difficulty in that. We already maintain the streets. We already have the easement on it, and we think that it would just be a cleaner way to delete that obligation. So all of these things are to take that item, that action, out of two separate agreements by the different parties. There's also a sign variance on here. We're asking for their entry and exit signs. They exceed the normal code. They were not part of the original sign program. We're asking you to include those. We would typically do this administratively, but because we had this item before you, we just ask that you wrap them all together. With that, I have staff is here. The developer is here as well for any questions that you have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lansfane. I have no speaker cards. Just 1 second, Mr. Yusefian. I have no speaker cards. This is a public hearing. And is that correct, Artie? There are no. Okay. All right. So let me close the public input portion. Let me go to Councilmember Yusefian.
I'd like to get a clarification. You said that the previous agreement basically said that they have the right of way. So now we're eliminating that.
No, previously we were going to vacate the right-of-way.
Okay.
It would essentially become a private street
okay.
with public access.
Why are you doing this? Why are you eliminating it? Because if it was theirs, wouldn't the maintenance of the roadway be also theirs?
I'll turn to...
By eliminating that, we still maintain the maintenance, right?
Let's go to Jillian Van Meiden.
In answer to your question, that's correct. They would have taken over the maintenance, but there are a couple of issues. One is that in order to vacate the street, the cooperation and consent from the adjoining property owners would be necessary. In order to do that, that part of that maintenance would also responsibility would also go to the adjoining property owner, and that's the McGuire properties that own the properties to the south.
Okay.
That was a difficulty that, to my understanding, was an issue that was not going to be easily overcome. That's really it. It is getting the cooperation and the consent from the other adjoining property owner, as well as the maintenance issue. As Mr. Lansafame indicated, the city is already maintaining this small portion of Burchette. It is, as you know, a cul-de-sac in that area. It's a very minor portion of the Burchette Street. So that is, those are really the essential reasons behind why the developer requested that this condition be eliminated.
Okay, thank you. Mr. City Manager.
What we might do, however, is include in this agreement that the developer and subsequent owners will agree to a vacation if at such time all the affected property owners would agree. So we could pursue this at a later time, for example, with McGuire, and if it worked out, then we'd at least already have the consent of the hotel owner to do that. That would be a way to allow us
McGuire
to
may sell and leave. and
or
somebody else
McGuire
can-
may just decide at some point it's in his benefit to also then have this become a private street and be able to have more control over it. So, but at least it wouldn't require that we go back to all of the property owners if we wanted to pursue it.
All right. Any other input? Mr. Weaver, Mr. Quintero.
Well, I actually, this isn't before us, but I want to know when we're going to either get a report or get some understanding of the building in terms of the heliport. That issue is something that I'm very concerned with. I like this building a lot. I was there just a couple of days ago. I drove through the end of the cul-de-sac and looked at what will be the lobby and entrance area, and I think it's going to be great. So, super well designed building. However, that heliport is completely off the charts as far as I'm concerned. That wasn't what I voted for. So I'd like to have some answer, we need to find out what's going on with the
All right,
heliport.
I think that there is, Mr. Lansford, I think there is a considerable amount of consensus regarding the heliport issue. So as a separate issue, obviously that's not what we're voting on today, as Councilmember Quintero pointed out, but I think we do need to have that issue back to us. Just one second, if that's all right. Councilmember Yusefian?
Mr. Mayor, the developers here, I'd like to hear from them now because we have constituents who have asked us, send us emails. I drive by, I look at it, I'm a contractor, and believe me, I remember projects. So
Right, well,
I'd like to know, is that project finished? Is the heliport finished or still under construction?
Before we go to that question, though, let's not lose the question, but let's try to wrap up what we're discussing here first. Are there any more questions
Not on this.
related to this particular topic?
He's asked the only
Councilmember Najarian.
With regard to Burchette, it still is going to remain as a driveway into that parking structure of McGuire, correct? Now, would the fact that it's being vacated or not vacated have any effect on that easement? I guess it would be an easement if it were vacated. If it were not vacated, it's a public street up till the apron of the
Right.
parking structure.
I suppose if it were vacated, we would have to get a public access easement. We'd have to reserve a public access easement so that people could get from Central even into the hotel or into the garage.
But we're preserving our rights, as Mr. City Manager said.
Well, if you
We should
included
do it
that,
that
if you
way.
included that condition, and if the developer were in agreement with that, then I think you'd at least preserve your ability to only have to talk to the McGuire or McGuire successors to vacate if we want to do that sometime in the future.
All right. Mr. Weaver, anything?
No.
Okay. Before we address these motions and resolutions, then let's, if we can we approach this other question of the heliport without noticing that?
There's no decision or debate on the issue. It's just a point of clarification
Well,
concerning
I suspect it's going to be a series of
the
protracted
project.
questions.
And with respect to resolution of the item, it should be placed on the agenda for that purpose. But short question.
Yeah, that's the key
Relative
word.
to
I don't think this will fall in the category of brief, but let's take a crack at it, and you pick up something heavy and hurl it this way if it gets to be too long. Who is present that could...
It's now 7 minutes to 5. So
Yes.
So answer it briefly.
see what brief
And
is.
if you wouldn't mind, for the record, stating your name, please.
Okay. Ronnie Lam, I'm represent the developer, so Campsite Company. Address is 411 East Huntington Drive, Arcadia. Thank you.
Okay.
And I am John Hicks. I also represent the owner Campsite Company, 411 East Huntington Drive.
Okay, very good.
So the-
Who would like to take a crack at Mr. Quintero's question?
Okay. Good afternoon, City Council. It's been about almost like 3 years when we start constructions.
Right.
When the project was approved, to answer one quick question, yes, original intention, of course, the helipad was be finishing. This is what we completed the helipad. I know the reason, is a atrium building, which the building itself require almost like 300 CFM exhaust during every minute when they have fire happen on the atrium. So when the helipad, which is basically only one company in this whole region is doing that helipad. It was originally trying to build it as a concrete, lightweight concrete and structural steel, but it's turned out to be too heavy. That is basically, in order to put the structure up, there's no structure element that can support those structure elements. So we went to a lighter structure and design build with a FEC company, which serving as a design build element on that. And of course, if you start think about when the helicopter have to be landed in there, it must be some emergency. Most of the time. So when the fire was happen, when the hotel was start kicking into all those 300 CFM rising from the atrium, at the same time the helicopter was landing there, so it created a big turbulence that they would maybe create a situation that the turbulence would affect the undersides of the helipad. And that's why I highly recommend from them at that time, they should not be putting something solid in there to cover it in order to make sure the turbulence is not going to blow away that panel or whatever that happened. So we have to be doing that. So that's why the element was recommended not to put it in. At that time, of course, dealing on the looks of it, of course, until it get done now, we went back to, of course, look at with a lot of, difference of opinion. Of course, if for me, I look at it, definitely I look at it, I say, wait a minute, seems like it's a skeleton hanging up, on the roof. But, hotel right now, if you look at Starwood, you look at, the Marriott, if you look at the Starwood Newport, the Aloft, it's basically the hotel, the all finishing is all, you're walking out the building, you still see all the big steel columns all around, and then their seating basically is all open. And for our generation to look at it, for me to look at it, I don't like it either. But for a generation that, let's say if my daughter look at it, okay, she's just right, in third year in college. So they look at it, they say, it's perfectly, acceptable to lots of the, I mean, by the way, she studied in architecture. I mean, the way they learn it, so they look at it, I mean, the structure would be pretty nice, acceptable for their generations. So,
Excuse me, ma'am, we won't do this. We won't do this. If you want to speak, you can fill out a speaker card and come forward.
There's no speaker card, sir.
That's right, you didn't fill one out. If you would like to speak, you must fill out a speaker card. But we're not going to do this.
It's in the back of the
It's
room.
in the back, but we're not going to do this. Continue, please.
okay, so going back to there, we definitely, I mean, if this is the direction of the city and the council, as I say, my project manager here, he can explain more. I mean, we start hearing this back about 2 weeks ago regarding the concern with the city council and maybe some of the citizens. Definitely, we went back to FEC and say, hey, wait a minute. Originally, we have a kind of like enclosure to the undersides of the helipad. So I don't think at this point we will be able to get away from not putting it. So they are looking at it. But regarding on how we're going to detail it and working on it, we're still working on it. I think from John, basically, John is the original designer of this project. So I think after he reviewed it with the FEC Corporation, they are still working on it, but they have some suggestions. So I let John maybe create some more suggestions. So.
Okay, Mr. Hicks.
Yes. Mayor, members of the council, just as Mr. Lamb has alluded to, this stop ended up going to a design-build concept due to some mitigating factors that occurred during the construction process and, of course, some of the implementations that were submitted earlier. And that was just the sheer original concept of the structure was too heavy in its original design due to, one, rotor wash, the requirement for the 300,000 CFM of exhaust air requirement for the atrium. And then, of course, with it being a high-rise, the wind load that is generated on top of the roof. To have a solid structure, all of these components combined put some loading on this structure. Now, with that said, we have been, this was brought to our attention a couple weeks ago by agency that there was a concern that with such a refined elevation, a refined building, did we think that this was acceptable? And, that's what I always love, as I've explained, what I love about architecture is that it invokes emotion and conversation. And is always one of the things I loved about the profession. Like it, hate it, that's always subject to opinion. But we are actively pursuing a means that our structural engineer is going to consider satisfactory so that the structure does remain safe, obviously, first and foremost. We have a consideration with the FAA, which FEC is participating in assisting us to make sure that the FAA does not have any challenges with whatever we do with this structure because it is for evacuation purposes. And we are actively pursuing a means to rectify the current challenge that members of council have brought to our attention, as well as Redevelopment Agency.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks. Let me
If
see
you
if
have
there are
any- if you have any specific questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Yes, let's see if we have any questions. Mr. Yusefian.
I took the opportunity today to check with staff and look at your design-build drawings. And basically, your design-build drawings show that the facade there is covered with some type of a material that is not solid. I understand when a helicopter is landing, you have to get the air out, and I understand what he's talking about, the air coming out and creating the turbulence. But currently, if you look at it, the skeleton that is designed, it's not very attractive because it looks like it's on a temporary nature to an extent. And I understand the pipes you've used is strong, it's going to hold it, but it needs to have some type of a covering. I do not anticipate the covering will be solid because then you have wind issues and it's going to be blown out. But it needs to be covered. Either it could be some sheet metal, it could be stainless steel that is perforated. You have all kinds of alternatives that they could design something that they will put in, allow the air to get out, and also when you drive on Central or you drive from the freeway, you look at it, it has a look that we all fell in love with. I mean, it is a beautiful building. And I keep driving and I go, oh, it's not finished yet. So when they're going to put that section on, it's not finished yet. And I will tell you, I hope that you work with your engineering firm to come up with solution. There's always a solution to deal with that, so it gets back to the attractive building that we all approved and proud of.
Rest assured that, as Mr. Lamb has mentioned earlier, that we are currently working with the engineers.
By the way, Mr. Lamb has a better taste than his daughter, probably. I like to think that we older people have better taste.
Thank you very much. I think to assure you, yes, I mean, definitely. 2 weeks ago, when we first hear about that, I already direct John, work with FEC and work with FAA and also the structural engineering to try to produce a looks that would, I mean, go back to the original rendering and make sure that it looks like that, so, and acceptable by all the other agency.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Weaver.
Just a thought. That substructure, you look at it, it's all dark black, whatever. The thing you might look at is just paint. You put in like a teal or something on posts and white or other colors. I don't know what it would look like when you popped it in the computer, but just maybe the coloration, you could create a pattern there that would blend in with the rest of the building. Just a thought. No additional weight, loads, or anything.
Okay.
Cheaper, too.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for these two gentlemen? Because I'd like to reopen the hearing briefly to get a comment from the speaker. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Let me reopen the hearing. The speaker is Adriana Hernandez.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
I am a
afternoon.
registered nurse by profession, licensed in the state of California for the last 13 years. I reside behind a school. Safety to me is crucial for many reasons. I am asthmatic myself. I suffer continuously of asthmatic attacks. My last attack was triggered by 3 wonderful smokers in the front door of my apartment. When I dialed 911, they told me, they give me my sympathies, but they can smoke. So, the safety about breathing clean air has not been regulated yet. When you have an helipad, you blow all this dust, we all share it. Unfortunately, you need a huge radius of empty space to land a helicopter. By the way, I am an Army-trained nurse in the south country of Mexico. So I learned about pollution by living there. I came to the United States to try to stay away from the pollution. I have not been successful. Unfortunately, when you have too many cars, too many buildings, too many fumes, we all breathe it. So in regards to the spaces, I don't know. I can just tell you for sure, the speed of the wind on top of the size of the particles that goes to your lungs will cause your death. How much, when, depends on the speed of the wind, the size of the shaking, the speed of the landing, and the quickness of the emergency team response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I will close the public hearing again. Let's see.
Make a motion.
Well, before you make a motion, is that what you were going to do?
Yeah, I was going to move.
Before you do, I'd like to get a chance to just comment on a couple of things with regard to the heliport, since we're in helicopter port land. With regard to the, I wasn't here when this began, obviously, but I have watched it because, like many of the residents in the city, I'm very interested in this new development in our downtown. I think it's a positive development. However, and the design I thought was wonderful, which is why, before coming to council, just as a resident, I supported the council supporting this project. However, I just want to say that with all due respect to generational tastes in architecture, I think architectural design, good architectural design is good architectural design, no matter whether some age group might not notice or make a comment. And to me, good architectural design doesn't happen by accident. And to me, an ugly architectural element which gets that way because of structural and or design problems or bungling isn't what this council member is supportive of. So I would like to see some kind of answer that addresses this. I certainly hope my colleague, Councilmember Yusefian, is right when he says there's always a solution. Question is whether the solution is whether the solution is one that is a functional solution or an aesthetic solution or both. Obviously, I would like to see both. So I know that I understand the concept good architecture is supposed to engender conversation. It's the kind of conversation I'm concerned about. There's the kind of conversation that what does that architectural element mean, and there's the kind of conversation that, my God, that is ugly. What did our elected officials, what were they thinking? Those are two different kinds of engendered discussions. The one is greatly welcome, the other is unacceptable. So in any case, as you can see, it is a point of contention with this council because it is with the community, and we're hearing it quite often, I might add. So I hope that we do find a solution. With that, let me go to my colleague, Councilmember Yusefian.
With that, Mr. Mayor, I would like to move 1B and D for the council.
Second.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Clarification, and that was with the
With that
recommended-
modification that Mr.
Modification.
Starbird made.
So that's item B and D for council. We have a second with the modification. Mr. City Clerk.
Council members Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes.
Mayor. Mr. Chair,
For agency.
I would like to make a motion on 1A and C with the same modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Agency members Draymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Chairman Najarian.
Yes.
I would like to move 1E, which is the variance for the sign. I'm going to ask you just one thing. The material is consistent with the material that's on the building.
That's correct. Yes, it is.
That's all. Make the motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Agency members Draymond,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Chairman Najarian.
Yes.
Is there a motion to adjourn for council?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second.
For the agency.
Second.
Agency is adjourned.
Thank you all very much.